Hi, welcome to today's episode where we're going to talk about alphabet soup. No, not the type you eat, but the alphabet soup of all of the acronyms that have to do with dealing with a Chinese supplier when it comes to banking terms and shipping terms. So with that said, let's jump right in and get started. When you're dealing with a Chinese supplier and you've gone through Alibaba and you're looking and you see all these things on your page, you see all these acronyms and abbreviations, you think, gosh, I thought this was in English. I don't understand any of this. Very, very common. What I'm going to do today is going to be a relatively short episode, but I want to go through and give you some of the information and tell you what some of those acronyms mean so you can better negotiate and better work with your Chinese supplier. Let me pull up here the list of things. And let's start out talking about banking terms. That's really more the important aspect of what that is, because when you're dealing with a supplier, obviously you want to pay and you want to pay in terms that make sense to you as well as to them. Probably one of the first things you'll see is a term called T/T, which really comes from olden times, I guess, when that was called telegraphic transfer. In modern times, that really means an electronic wire transfer. Most local banks in which we all deal here in the Western world will have the capacity to send money anywhere in the world through a wire transfer. And that's really all that T/T means is, or telegraphic transfer means. You'll literally go to your bank and you say, okay, the Chinese supplier will give you their banking information. And then you go to your bank, and many times you might be able to do it online with some banks, but you typically might go down to your local branch and say, I want to wire X amount of money to this particular address. And you give the bank all of the routing numbers and the information the Chinese company has given you. And in U.S. dollars, it'll be about $50 to send that transfer. So probably very similar in euros or pounds or any other type of currency, but somewhere in that range to send it. They'll receive it electronically, and then you're good. Very simple, very common thing that's used in international business. The next one is L-C, which stands for line of credit. This is typically used from a bigger company, but probably not very much with Amazon sellers, but you still need to know what it means. When you're dealing with a line of credit, you might have go to your local bank if it's a big enough bank or a national branch, and they might have offices in China where you go in and you have enough money in a bank or a bank account where they agree to give you a line of credit. So you go in, you place your order with a Chinese manufacturer, and instead of you making a direct transfer, a TT transfer to them, they're going to take money that you have in an account and pay for it with credit, and eventually you'll pay it back. But they're making the payment on a credit payment as opposed to the actual cash that comes from a telegraphic transfer. Typically that's used, again, with bigger companies that have very long and established relationships. The next one you're going to see is W/U, which really stands for Western Union, or really MoneyGram is another one. That's where you're going to go into your local office, and you can even do this online to where you wire them money just like you would anybody else anywhere in the world. A lot of people have concerns about dealing with Western Union because it doesn't seem in their mind as legitimate as maybe the telegraphic transfer. Typically, Western Union is used more for individuals or just regular people as opposed to business setting where telegraphic transfer is the norm. Now, the costs are less than Western Union, but again, that's something for you just to be aware of how that works. So now you've got a pretty good understanding of what those three main terms are, and you should be able to proceed with a little more confidence going forward. Now, once you're comfortable with the payment terms, the other thing you're going to have is the shipping terms. Once your product's produced, how is it going to get to you? What's the easiest, best, fastest way to do that? You're going to have two options, really. You're going to be able to send in by air. You can have it sent in by sea. Air is typically faster but more expensive, where freight is slower and obviously much less costly. But regardless of whether something is being sent by air or by sea, let's look at some of the terms there and see if we can break some of those down. The first one is FOB, and that stands for free on board or freight on board. And literally what that means is that they're going to manufacture the product and they're going to turn it over to the shipping company. Everything that's included in the price is just for the manufacturing, and it excludes shipping. FOB is really the standard, especially in the Western world, okay? The other thing you're going to see in there, which is very similar, is called XWorks, which is EXW. And XWorks really means that it's really designed for bigger companies where they're going to produce it, and somebody's going to back an 18-wheel truck up to their warehouse and load it and take it to the shipping or to the ship. It's the actual ship, the water ship, the boat, and going to deliver it that way. So XWorks really means the price only includes manufacturing and excludes shipping. Really the difference of FOB and XWorks, again, is really for larger companies, and really when you've got larger shipping organizations involved. Like say, and Apple having iPhones made in China is probably using XWorks, where you and I ordering our goods from the supplier I mean, really, they deliver it or make arrangements to get it to the supplier themselves, or to the shipper, I should say, not the supplier. If that's the case, it's probably going to be FOB. The other one, the last one in there, is cost, insurance, and freight. And that's one that's really not used very much, because that, if they quote you that, they're including shipping in their estimate. And that really doesn't seem to be the norm, but that's the difference. Now, in all of these things, one of the things I would encourage you to do, there is no ironclad, there are no shipping police. Well, I guess there are, but not really in this case, to where every manufacturer could be slightly different, use a variation of this. All of these things you must communicate well with your supplier, so you know ahead of time what their definition of FOB or X-Works is and your definition is, because the last thing you want is a surprise. Very easy to eliminate if you just communicate up front. But anyway, short one today. Just wanted to go over and make sure that you understood those terms. And our last episode, we actually talked a little bit more about dealing with a Chinese supplier, which included some shipping. So if you want a little bit more detail on the actual process, go back and listen to that episode. So with that said, I want to thank you for coming in today. Let's go to our next segment, which is questions and answers and Mail Time with Mark. Welcome to Mail Time with Mark. This is where I answer questions from those of you who are watching or listening to the podcast. In our first question today, we have from Kim Sue, and Kim Sue asks, what about the customs and the imports and the duties on things that you have shipped into the country? Are there any acronyms? Are there anything that we do know specifically about that? Well, really, Kim Sue, not really. Most of the times when you have something shipped, all of that is prearranged. Now, if you're having a large order sent by sea, and it's a whole container full of goods, maybe there's some different issues, different things there. But for most of us who are Amazon sellers, we're having, in many cases, our first order sent by air. And in that case, whether you're dealing with a Chinese shipper or you're dealing with DHL or FedEx, all of your customs, all of your duties are typically included in your cost of freight. All the paperwork, all of the excise taxes, all of those types of things. But regardless, you always want to ask your supplier and make sure that is covered, because again, I'm not a big fan of surprises. Again, now if you have something coming in by freight, or by sea, it's a little more complex, and again, really beyond the scope of this training series, because I think for most people, you're going to have things coming in by air. But in most cases, it's covered, and just ask. So hope that answers your question. Thanks for coming to this episode. See you next time.